So kind of start getting kicked off here. As I mentioned before, my name is Andrew Holloway. I'm the Davenport Group Executive that will be your host. And then the other presenter today will be Matt, which I'll let him introduce himself.
Yeah, hi folks. Thanks for having me. My name is Matt McSpirit. I'm one of our engineering technologists at Dell. Formerly Microsoft of 16 years, joined Dell 2 years ago with a focus on Azure Hybrid, all running on Dell infrastructure. And I'm going to take you through lots of cool stuff today. So thanks for having me. I'm also an Azure MVP as well, and just looking forward to speaking to you all. Thank you.
And then later today for our virtual event, we'll have Mike Walsh. So Mike Walsh is the coffee expert. He'll walk us through those of you that chose to get the coffee. For those of you who chose to get the Grubhub, maybe you got some tacos or some food to go with you. But just get ready for the presentations, get ready to ask questions. We really want everyone to engage. It's all about education. It's all about the customer. If you want to throw something in the chat, our account teams will be looking at that. If you want to come off mute, we'll give pauses for that as well. So really just want you to have a good time, understand, right? Our goal is to educate you on the technology, help you with those business needs, and just with the industry changes out there. We know there's a ton out there. So a little background on Davenport Group. Since 2001, Sonia and Paul Clifford, right, started this company, and I'm glad they did because it gave me a job. But the big thing is it's customer first, right? It's always about the customer. It's about helping them meet those objectives and then find solutions that are going to help them achieve those objectives, but also get their weekends back, right? If we can put the right solutions in place, we all sleep better at night. Everything from cloud to security to infrastructure. And that cloud piece, right, we're talking about Azure today. We're talking about Azure Stack. We can talk about SQL. Our account teams out there have engineers that they can bring in to help you through understanding the licensing, how to optimize the cloud, right, whatever those needs are. From that security standpoint, we have a CISO. We can talk about VPN, we can talk about firewalls, right? We can talk about certs. We can talk about anything to do with Europe regulations or America regulations on security, ransomware. We're here to help. And then that last piece, infrastructure. That's your compute, your network, your storage, anything to do with that infrastructure, someone else's cloud or your private cloud or your data center, right? We're here to help. And then we wrap that around with services. We have a full services team, we have engineers, and that's probably one of the biggest pieces we bring to the table is these engineers actually do these solutions day in and day out. They have to live it, they have to breathe it just like you do. So our goal is to help you understand it, help you meet those needs, and really just become an extension of your team. So really appreciate the time today. And Matt, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that. Okay, so let's get into understanding a bit more about Azure Hybrid. But before we do that, I want to spend a few moments bringing people up to speed with how the Apex brand at Dell has transitioned and evolved over the last, let's say, 12 months. And on the eve of our Dell Technologies World Conference, which is next week, there'll no doubt be even more announcements around Apex as a brand. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, let me just bring you up to speed with some of the key stuff that we've been working on over the last 12 months and a realignment of the Apex brand. Because historically, anybody who's engaged with Dell previously and looked into Apex would have known Apex as a brand that represents our as-a-service offerings. So consumption-based processes to embrace hardware and software solutions. Very much a cloud model, consumption-based, but for hardware. Now, that brand Apex has now evolved to represent Dell's investments in the multi-cloud ecosystem. Multi-cloud being a state where customers find themselves in, having embraced multiple hyperscaler offerings in addition to on-premises infrastructure. And Dell has solutions that can help in all of those different arenas. So from an on-prem perspective, as many of you will know, Dell has a heritage in providing great on-prem infrastructure solutions, such as storage solutions, protection solutions, and more. We are working closely with the hyperscalers to deliver those technologies that have been born on the ground, on premises, and enable consumption of those within the hyperscalers. So if you're embracing cloud workloads today in Azure, AWS, GCP, and you're looking to complement that with some additional advanced storage and protection technologies inside those public clouds, that's where our Apex offerings can help. So that was a new initiative we announced at last DTW, Dell Tech World, last year. And we're continuing to evolve and enhance those as we go forward. That's what we call our ground to cloud part of the Apex strategy. Then on the other side of the coin here, We have the work we've engaged with our hybrid partners, VMware, Microsoft, and Red Hat, to bring the best in breed software technologies and cloud initiatives down to run on premises to help you achieve goals around network latency, compliance, regulations, and more. We still realize, and I think the hyperscalers and especially Azure realize that a lot of organizations still want to keep a number of workloads, if not a large percentage of workloads, on premises for the reasons of compliance, regulations, networking, security, or just preference. And so meeting you where you are, bringing cloud technologies to you, I think is a smart move by the hyperscalers, and Dell has partnered with them to ensure that we can deliver the best in breed experiences. And how that comes to bear is in the form of our Apex Cloud platforms. These are a set of universal building blocks, hardware building blocks that live on premises, that can be procured through traditional CapEx-based approaches or through more of a consumption-based model, that represent the latest innovation from Dell in our 16th generation hardware, PowerEdge servers, our new PowerFlex software-defined storage, and our software layer on the left-hand side here that represents innovation that gels together the operating system, the hardware, and more. So these cloud platforms, there are two flavors available today and hopefully a third in the not too distant future. There's the Apex Cloud platform for Microsoft Azure, where we'll spend most of our time today. There's the Apex Cloud platform for Red Hat OpenShift, running containerized workloads more predominantly. And there'll be an Apex Cloud platform for VMware, which brings that familiar VMware experience on premises on our latest generation infrastructure. All three of those software variants share this common hardware platform. And so you have a lot of flexibility going forward to change direction, to utilize this hardware in the way that's most appropriate for you going forward. So today I could start with an Apex Cloud platform for Azure deployment, and a couple of years down the line may decide, well, actually, I'd like that same hardware to now be a Red Hat deployment. You don't have to jump through lots of hoops to make that transition. This universal set of building blocks really unlocks that opportunity. And we'll talk more about some of these key building blocks later on. So that's a bit of an intro to our Apex Cloud platform. But where do we go from here in terms of integration with Azure, and what are Microsoft doing strategically with Azure and how it pertains to hybrid? Well, many of you, I'm sure, are embracing Azure. We've got a little poll shortly to understand what some of your preferences are around the public cloud, so stay tuned for that. But for the time being, Microsoft is making a lot of smart moves in the public cloud, enabling organizations to adopt familiar workloads like virtual machines, database workloads, PaaS services, and more in Azure. They're very common, very widely adopted. But in addition, Microsoft's making it really easy to turn on additional complementary features and functionality to add value to those core workloads. So for example, if I had 100 virtual machines running in Azure, Microsoft makes it very easy to turn on monitoring for those virtual machines, or security, or governance, or backup. Just with a couple of ticks, you're getting extra value, but you're also paying a little bit more to Microsoft through your Azure subscription. But they're bringing about those capabilities in a very simple, easy to use manner. That's not to say that it doesn't need the expertise that partners like Davenport can offer to help guide you and navigate through the different choices you've got. But all in all, the value of the solution within Azure is increasing. But that doesn't answer the challenge of, what about my on-prem infrastructure? Do I have to treat that on-prem as an island completely siloed from what I'm doing in the public cloud? And the answer is no, because through Azure Arc, a key Azure service that's now available and been available for a number of years, this allows me as an organization to reach out of Azure and manage things that don't live in Azure, but manage them from Azure as if they are a native Azure resource. So whether it's servers, virtual machines, Windows, Linux, Kubernetes clusters, SQL servers, and more, all of those things can live on premises, stay where they are, your data resides on-prem, but they can be projected into Azure and managed, governed, monitored, secured, as if they are a native Azure resource. So Microsoft's being very smart about enabling that ability to manage those things from the cloud. And that's how one of the ways Microsoft is bringing those cloud technologies to you, rather than saying the answer is migrate to cloud each and every time, because that's not the answer. And that's what we all know. But where does Azure Stack HCI fit in? Well, for organizations who are looking at potentially changing direction on premises or modernizing at the edge or in the core data center, Microsoft has a solution in the market, Azure Stack HCI, that runs on great hardware from the likes of Dell that enables you to have a little bit more Azure-ness within your environment. So this is an Azure integrated solution by design. We'll explore this in a few moments, but this is the key way that I think you can start to modernize on-prem whilst retaining that deep integration with Azure and bring more cloud services down to where you need them and pay for what you use. So we've got our first poll question. Let's flip over to that. We'd like to understand, if possible, what's your experience with Azure Stack HCI today? Are there any experts out there, or is this your first real look at Azure Stack HCI? So if you could answer our poll, please. 3 simple choices. What's your experience with private cloud and specifically Azure Stack HCI? Are you an expert? Are you intermediate? Or are you a beginner? I'm going to put, I'll put my answer in there as well. Okay, so most folks are beginners. Excellent. Well, you're going to take away a lot from today's session. I'm going to introduce you to some of the core capabilities and features of Azure Stack HCI and how it can provide a lot of value to your organization. So that's nice. And just the 1% expert, which I'm not sure who that was. It might have been me. I apologize. Okay, so I think we've got plenty of responses there. Andrew, do you want to any more? Do you want to wait for a few more? Any more questions in the chat or anything, or should we proceed?
Yeah, and so just real quick for those who've jumped in a little bit later, we have the chat, we have their mic, right? So please don't hesitate to ask questions if you don't want to do that now. Your account teams will be reaching out after this. And then at the end of the presentation, as we move to the virtual event for coffee, that'll be coming later. So yes, so please don't hesitate. We want to be as interactive as possible, get as deep as you need to. So thank you.
Yep, awesome. And you can also use the raise hand in the Teams button, and we'll keep track of that as well. So thank you very much for that. Okay, thanks for filling out that poll. Let's carry on. Now, when it comes to Azure Stack HCI, what is it? Well, this is a specialized operating system from Microsoft that runs on your choice of hardware. It lives on your on-prem infrastructure. Anybody who's used Windows Server in the past, it will look pretty familiar, but it is its own dedicated operating system. The big difference with Azure Stack HCI, or one of the big differences compared to a Windows Server, is that it is integrated with Azure by design. So once the deployment is completed, it's connected to Azure, and you pay for Azure Stack HCI typically through a subscription model. So based on the number of physical cores in your cluster, that reflects how much you will pay to Microsoft for the usage of this solution. So a simple example, we're getting close to the end of the week, so I always keep my maths increasingly simple as we get close to Friday. But let's say you have a 2-node cluster in an edge location, 2 nodes, 20 cores per node. That's a total of 40 cores. And the cost of Azure Stack HCI is $10 per core per month. So that would be $400 for that particular Azure Stack HCI cluster. We'll talk about some of the ways that there are discounts and different ways, and the team at Davenport can certainly help you navigate that as well. But that's just the list price off the shelf. You pay for it based on your usage. The smaller the environment, the less. The larger the environment, you pay a little bit more, just like any other Azure service or majority of other Azure services. So specialized operating system, available as a subscription, but what does it give you? I always equate Azure Stack HCI to a bit like a Swiss Army knife. If you want it to do virtual machines, it's great at that. Pop out the virtual machine tool. But it's also got Kubernetes built into it as well. So if you're looking at modernizing your infrastructure, embracing Kubernetes, then that's a great option there as well. Pop out the Kubernetes tool. It's also got the ability to bring additional Azure services down as well. So speaking of which, I want to just refer back to, I mentioned a second poll earlier on. So we've got a poll that I'd like to understand how much Azure experience folks have got, and also what's your primary public cloud that you're using today? I've already mentioned that Azure Stack HCI links in with Azure natively. So let's just flip up that quick second poll. And what is your public cloud, your primary public cloud? And if you're using multiple, all pretty evenly, there's an option for you there as well. But if you do have a preference that you're using, even if you're just starting your journey, we'd love to learn a little bit more about that. So it looks like Azure. I'm going to tick my little box as well. I'm sure you can probably guess which one mine is. There we go. It shouldn't be too much of a giveaway. Okay, so that interesting results here. Some are using multiple, great. Other, so I'm assuming by other it could be Alibaba or another hosted cloud from another vendor. That's fine. Azure seems to be the far out leader there, and that's interesting because when you look at the market share of public cloud services, AWS is typically associated with being the market leader, but with enterprises specifically, Azure is actually the market leader for public cloud adoption. So, and these results seem to correlate that as well. So that's great. If you have an Azure strategy, if you're already embracing Azure, Azure Stack HCI fits nicely into that. Because the management, as I said earlier, that's a key element of this story. The management of Azure Stack HCI is done from the Azure portal. So let's say as an organization, you're running, deploying, building workloads natively in Azure with your development teams or your IT teams. Managing Azure Stack HCI just fits into that. Even though it runs in your data center, you're managing it from the cloud. As I said, it's delivered as a service. So that's something that's a key change from previous, from other offerings like Windows Server. It's a subscription model. From a supportability perspective, you can call Microsoft, you can call Dell, you can call Davenport. You've got the flexibility, but all of that ticket management is all centrally handled for you and easily managed. So you don't need to be balancing tickets all over the place. With this is an appliance-like solution where everything is all centralized and easy to manage. And from a size perspective, this solution, it starts at just a single node. So you don't have to buy 2 nodes to get started. You can have a single node cluster. Admittedly, you do sacrifice a little bit of redundancy there by just having a single node. But we've engaged with organizations where perhaps for certain retail environments or manufacturing locations where budgets are very constrained, but they want this Azure goodness, these Azure capabilities that we're going to discuss shortly. They want that in that local environment. But they can just start with a single node in this case and grow from there. So it offers a nice entry point for organizations looking to get started. We see most common deployments start at the 2 or the 3 nodes for redundancy and some additional benefits and grow from there. We'll talk a bit more about some of the hardware options a bit later on, but Microsoft's positioning for Azure Stack HCI definitely does lend itself more to those edge locations and managing the fleet of Azure Stack HCI clusters that you have from one location, the Azure portal, and treating them as an extension of Azure. Now, let's kick on a little bit further. Let's assume you've gone ahead and you've deployed a simple 2-node Azure Stack HCI cluster in an environment. Let's say it's gone into a manufacturing location, and you've deployed some common workloads on top. Remember I said that Azure Stack HCI is a bit of a Swiss Army knife. So you've got Windows servers deployed on there, some Linux servers deployed on there in virtual machines, some database workloads. You've even gone ahead and you've taken a leap of faith and you're going ahead with some Kubernetes workloads as well, which is awesome. And they're all running happily on that Azure Stack HCI cluster. Remember when I was talking about Azure earlier, and Microsoft has done a really smart job of making it really easy to turn on additional value-added capabilities in Azure for things like monitoring, governance, security, and more. Well, they've done the same thing with Azure Stack HCI. So it's very easy for me, once I've got this cluster and workloads deployed, to turn on things like monitoring in Azure for this cluster. So all of my Azure Stack HCI clusters that are on premises can now be monitored centrally from Azure, side by side with my other Azure workloads that I'm monitoring. The same is true of governance with Azure Policy. Anybody who's used Azure Policy will know it's a very useful tool and service in Azure to help me get visibility into configuration and compliance of workloads and services in Azure. Well, why does that have to stop at Microsoft data centers? Well, now it extends down to my on-prem infrastructure. The same is true of security and threat detection. If I want to enable that, tick that box, and now I can start to centralize my security management across on-premises and in Azure. That is true hybrid consistency. And if I'm looking at a disaster recovery scenario, maybe I've got a single site and I don't have another on-premises location to replicate and recover to in the event of a disaster. Well, the use of Azure Site Recovery with this solution enables me to replicate VMs, virtual machines, from on-prem into Azure. And in the event of a disaster, I've lost my on-prem infrastructure, I can start up those workloads in Azure, run them there for a period of time, and then fail them back down on-prem when things are back online. These are just examples of some of the key Azure services that I can start to integrate with to really help me provide additional value to that core infrastructure. But let's be clear, these are optional. You don't have to turn them on. You don't have to use them. And just like any other Azure service, the more you turn on, the more you'll pay for those. They're all driven by usage. Now, we've got another poll that I'd like to run by you here, and it's related to workloads, in particular, legacy workloads. I'd like to understand, and please don't be shy and don't be embarrassed, we'd like to understand if you are running some of the older Microsoft workloads out there, and in particular, we're focusing on Windows Server and legacy versions of SQL Server. So Windows Server 2008, 2008 R2, Windows Server 2012, what is your oldest operating system or workload that you're running in there? So select your oldest legacy technology. Anybody running 2012? Anybody running SQL? Okay, a few versions there. We just wanted to pick your most legacy version or workload. If you've got more, that's okay. Okay, wow, Zachary's got Windows Server 2000. Wow. Unfortunately, I don't have a solution for that one. Actually, it will actually run on Azure Stack HCI, but the benefit I'm setting myself up to talk about here won't help you in this instance. But okay, good. And if you're not running any, if you're running, and Jason's made a good point, there's not an option for NA. That's fine. Okay, that's great. If you're running more modern workloads, more modern versions, perfectly fine. Okay, I'm going to put SQL 2014 there. Okay, now that we've got a few responses there, it's a good mix. There's still a decent number who are running 2012 and 2012 R2 and SQL 2014. Great, I'm glad we've got that mix here. So let's go on. Why am I asking you this in the context of Azure Stack HCI? Well, now I'm going to tell you. There's a number of benefits that are available to you when you run Azure Stack HCI within your environment. One of them is that Microsoft will allow you to run this really specialized, fancy version of Windows Server called the Windows Server Data Center Azure Edition. Can't think where they came up with the name, but that is a special version of Windows Server that is only allowed to run on the Azure platform. The Azure platform is public Azure, but it's also Azure Stack HCI. And this special version has enhanced features around security, performance, hot patching, so less reboots a year. I think it reduces reboots by about 66%, which is, impressive. So that version of Windows Server is available for you to use on this platform. You can continue the use of that governance solution in Azure Policy for your workloads on Azure Stack HCI. Another nice benefit there. But the one in yellow that I'm highlighting here, this one's really important, and it ties into the question we just asked in the poll. Because if you do have legacy workloads like Windows Server 2012, SQL Server 2012, these workloads have gone past their 10-year life cycle with Microsoft. They've finished. They've gone through mainstream support, extended support. Now they are out of support. So you're at a bit of a crossroads, really. What do you do about those workloads? You can keep them running. Nobody's going to stop them for you. But what if you need to keep them patched, maintained? What if you've got compliance needs to ensure that they are maintained? Well, in that case, then Microsoft has an answer for you. You can purchase extended security updates for those particular workloads, Windows Server, SQL Server, and they're pretty expensive. And I'm not going to beat around the bush there. They are very expensive, intentionally so, because Microsoft wants to encourage you to move to newer versions, advanced capabilities, better features, and so on. They don't want you to stay on these older versions, but sometimes for application compatibility, other legacy reasons, you have to stay there, and that's fine. You can buy these extended security updates, very expensive. Well, with Azure Stack HCI, you can move those workloads onto Azure Stack HCI, those legacy workloads, and Microsoft will give you those extended security updates for free. It is a huge saving for some environments. We've seen some organizations, the savings they've made by not having to pay for those ESUs have more than paid for the new infrastructure to host them. And you get all the benefits of the Azure Stack HCI platform and infrastructure from that point forward. So it's a big, big benefit. Now, SQL 2014, we had it on the list there, SQL Server 2014, that reaches its end of support 10-year life cycle in July of this year, 2024. So as of 2024, you'll be at a crossroads there. What do we do with this? Can we upgrade the version of SQL? Well, maybe, but that might be complex. Move it to Azure Stack HCI, and you gain an extra 3 years of those free updates and buys you more time to figure out what to do next. So I wanted to urge you to investigate that. It's a real big opportunity to make some savings with Azure Stack HCI and can certainly pay dividends for itself if you are buying those extended security updates. For Windows Server 2000, and going back to Zachary, I'm sorry, they don't go as far back as that, but no, if you want to run Windows Server 2000 on there, I'm sure it'll run just fine. The final benefit for any of you who've already embraced Windows Server Data Center Edition in your environments, if you've got licenses, it doesn't matter whether the workloads are running on VMware or another platform. If you've got licenses for Windows Server Data Center with software assurance, you can have Azure Stack HCI subscription. Remember, I talked about it earlier, that $10 per core per month fee, that goes away. So you can use what's known as the Azure Hybrid benefit based on an existing investment you have to offset the cost of the usage of Azure Stack HCI. So a nice little benefit to investigate there. So a bit of homework for you. Definitely check out the extended security updates in the documentation and the Azure Hybrid benefit, because it can certainly help you with cost efficiencies there. Okay. Any questions in the chat? Doesn't look like it. Anything going on there? Any points for you, Andrew, you wanna bring up?
If you can just talk a little to the subscription model from let's say I have Windows, Server 2016.
Yep.
Now with the subscription model, I get rights to anything to upgrade, correct?
With software assurance, yeah, if you've got Windows Server, any version of Windows Server with software assurance, you can always move to the latest version. That's correct. If you don't have any Windows Server licenses with software assurance in your environment, and you think, well, I'd like to get the latest versions of Windows Server to run as workloads on top of Azure Stack HCI, there are lots of different options now to consume and purchase Windows Server. Still the traditional perpetual model, but you can also subscribe to Windows Server as well for running on the platform. So that's another option. Lots of different options on the table there, very flexible, and I'm sure Andrew and the team can help you navigate those pieces as well. Any more? Okay, there was one from Ryan. So do you need to have data center licensing for the amount of cores you're running? But you'll also need Azure Stack HCI subscription costs too, correct? That's correct. So looking at my slide here, if I had a 2-node cluster with 40 physical cores, then if I have Azure Stack HCI on there, that would be 40 cores of Azure Stack HCI to a subscription to Microsoft. And then from a Windows Server perspective, if I've got no software assurance on there, then yes, I would be buying the Windows Server licenses to run on top as well. You wouldn't be installing Windows Server on the host, similar to how you would do it with VMware. VMware would be on the hardware. You'd have your licenses assigned to those nodes to run the guests on top. But if you do have Windows Server with software assurance, then you can eliminate that Azure Stack HCI cost. That disappears. And we can share more information for that to make that more clear after the call as well. And a good point from Jim as well, just make sure that the hardware you get from Dell supports 23H2, which is the latest version of Azure Stack HCI that takes advantage of all of the Azure goodness that I was alluding to earlier. Azure Stack HCI being a subscription, you always get the latest and greatest features when you adopt the newest version, and you don't have to buy the next version. As a subscriber, you just get access to it. And Microsoft generally release a new major update to Azure Stack HCI once a year. So the newest version is called Azure Stack HCI 23H2. And the next release, it might be 24H2, we don't know. But when that comes along, you'll have the path to upgrade to that as and when Microsoft make that available. And hardware partners like Dell build and facilitate lifecycle management into the solution to help you move between those versions. And that's a great segue onto the Dell pieces here. Because what we've talked about so far is just the Azure Stack HCI operating system from Microsoft. What you want is a platform to run that on, a hardware platform that's been collaboratively curated and engineered to support that platform in the best experience. And that's what the Apex Cloud Platform, or ACP for Azure, as I'll shorten it to, really delivers. ACP for Azure is Dell's 16th generation solution to run Azure Stack HCI. Azure Stack HCI runs on this next gen or 16th gen PowerEdge platform. It's complemented by some Dell special source that runs in a virtual appliance on top of that infrastructure that gels together the hardware, the drivers, firmware, maintenance, and more with that operating system to give it a more turnkey appliance experience. And then in addition, I'm going to steal my own thunder for later on, but we will be soon, we as in Dell, soon will be supporting the ability for customers to attach external software-defined storage to Azure Stack HCI. This is an industry first for Azure Stack HCI. Dell is the only vendor that's going to support this, at least in the short term. And what it enables you is choice. If you prefer the hyper-converged architecture that's offered with Azure Stack HCI, go for it. And we expect that's probably going to be the default for many customers. But if you have a scenario where your data growth is outpacing compute needs, or you're looking for some more specialized storage features, or maybe you just prefer a disaggregated storage configuration, well, Dell will be able to scratch that itch for you and provide a solution in the form of Dell PowerFlex, which will attach to your Azure Stack HCI environment and offer you that flexibility of storage. And the beauty of this is that software-defined storage could be used not just for one Azure Stack HCI cluster, but for multiple, as well as other things within your environment. So that's a very well-protected investment there that can be used for lots of different things. Now, what is our goal with ACP for Azure? To give the best experience for running Azure Stack HCI on premises ultimately, and deliver down all of those great Azure services and integration points in as turnkey and appliance-like experience as possible. Once deployed, we want to make sure that the functionality that's available to you is consistent and integrated with Azure. We don't want to give you a completely inconsistent management experience where you're doing things in Azure one way and you're doing things on-prem in another. That's not the path we want to take going forward. So ensuring that we can give you an experience that's integrated appropriately with Azure for things like monitoring, management, lifecycle management updates, and more. That's our goal with the Apex Cloud Platform. And ultimately, whether you've got development teams or not, from an IT operations perspective, focusing on building and running your applications and workloads rather than keeping the lights on, that's our goal. We want to make the administrative experiences of this on-prem infrastructure as seamless and as easy as possible. And how's that realized? Well, with the Apex Cloud Platform Foundation software, that Dell secret source that I talked about that runs on every single cluster that we put out there, number one, it accelerates deployment. We've built a deployment mechanism into ACP for Azure that streamlines a huge amount of manual process. This is a complex beast. This is a complex solution now, the new version of Azure Stack HCI. So to deploy it, you want to make sure it's done right, predictably, in a very standardized fashion. And that's what we've built into our automation. Any of you who've ever deployed VxRail, taking that foundation of what we engineered with VMware for VxRail and bringing it over to the Microsoft side, that's the foundation of what we've built here. Building a very consistent automated deployment experience. Once it's deployed, you want to keep it up to date. I don't want to tell you to go off to this website and get which drivers you think are the right ones. Go and get this patch, which you think is the right patch, and then apply it and hope for the best. That's not an appliance experience, and that's not what we deliver with ACP for Azure. We curate the packages for you, taking you from a known good state to another known good state in a standardized, automated lifecycle management experience. If things go wrong, right from within the management interfaces. Create that service request, engage Dell for level 1, level 2 support, and we, in partnership with Davenport, would help get you to your green state again. And that includes things like automated upload of telemetry and logs, creation of that ticket right from the management experiences, integration with things like Cloud IQ, which you may be familiar with in the Dell portfolio. All of those are deeply embedded into the overall solution. But it doesn't do it in a way that is completely alien. We're integrating into the core Microsoft tools and experiences to make it easy to embrace and adopt from a skills perspective. Now, there's a couple of questions. I'll come to that one from Ryan in a few moments. I just want to, I can't do a Dell presentation without showing some bezels. It's just not possible, as I've learned in the last couple of years. So here's some bezels. We have 3 offerings on the docket for the ACP for Azure offering. 2 of them are available today. 1 is available in the coming months, hopefully later in the summer. The 2 that are available today are the more data center focused, let's say, traditionally rack mount offerings. The MC multi-cloud, yep, we went there, MC660 and the MC760, they take the starting point of our very popular 16th gen PowerEdge servers, curate the appropriate components, deeply validate those key components for use with Azure Stack HCI, and the result is an MC node, MC660, 760. Latest 4th gen Intel processors. We expect the 5th gen to be available on the platform in the not too distant future. Tons of scalability from CPU, memory, storage. GPUs I want to draw your attention to. I'm sure many of you are thinking about what next for things like virtual desktops on-prem or AI, ML. I mean, it's almost forced upon you now. You should be using AI for something somewhere. Maybe have you got enough co-pilots, that kind of thing. And GPUs are a core element of that. So what we want to make sure is we've got solutions in the portfolio that can give you the flexibility to meet your graphical needs, whether that's for VDI, virtual desktops, or whether that's for workloads that are more on the compute GPU side. And thankfully, with our partnership with NVIDIA, we've got a whole host of options there, ranging from the smaller, the entry-level GPUs, up to the larger. And this list is ever-changing. NVIDIA, as stock depletes, new models come available, and they are validated. But rest assured, any that are on our list have gone through deep validation across both Microsoft and Dell to meet the requirements of key workloads running on there. And those workloads could be VMs or Kubernetes-based workloads that can take advantage of these GPUs. So that's the 2 that are in market today. The other one, the MC4000, if you've got environments that are, let's call them challenging, dusty, space constrained, temperature variable, just not pristine surgical data center environments, let's say, then the MC4000, which is based on the XR4000 PowerEdge, this may meet your needs. And it's designed to be rackable, stackable, wall mountable, very flexible, and each one of these chassis can fit 2 or 4 shoebox-sized sleds inside, giving you a lot of flexibility in a small package, but still packs a punch. Up to 20 cores per node, squeeze a GPU in there, and even plenty of storage and high-performance storage and lots of memory as well. So that's due to be available in the next couple of months, so later in the summer. We're excited about that one, but it's got a specific use case, I think, that lends itself more to those remote sites, those smaller edge locations. There was a question, and I'm kind of tailing towards the end of my section now, from Ryan around, will there be an option to convert VxRail clusters over to Azure Stack HCI, or does it have to be specific hardware? Well, it's a great question, and one we've had a lot over the last couple of months, as you can probably imagine. The VxRail hardware is an appliance designed for VMware. And even though the hardware components and elements inside that may be identical, there's a lot more of this a VMware appliance-like solution that means it lives and dies as a VxRail solution. That's not to say that you couldn't wipe that hardware and install the Azure Stack HCI operating system. It would probably run just fine. But because that system identifies as a VxRail, a VMware-based system, you wouldn't get presented with the lifecycle management capabilities that are integrated with this platform that only are applicable to MC nodes, and we can't convert it to be an MC node. So in that respect, you drop down to things like hardware only support, and that solution, that VxRail node, wouldn't be on the Microsoft Azure Stack HCI catalog. So support would be your probably biggest consideration there. Performance would likely be okay. You wouldn't be offered optimized drivers for Azure Stack HCI, but if you wanted to use that platform, you just have to take into consideration that support. But we're happy to have an offline conversation about that in more depth. That's one of the things we're trying to solve with this MC node platform. Remember, I said the Apex Cloud platforms, one for Azure Stack HCI, one for Red Hat, one for VMware, universal hardware. So interchangeability becomes a lot more flexible because that's what people are looking for in the future. So good question, Ryan. Thanks for that. And I'm sorry that it's not the best news. Now, when we think about workloads, let me go back. I advanced my slide too quickly there. We saw this graphic before. Lots of people doing stuff in Azure, Azure Arc, reaching out to manage things on premises, and Azure Stack HCI, when we've moved up from beginner to intermediate now, I think. You're more familiar with some of its capabilities and what it delivers. Well, Azure Stack HCI is just the start, because Azure Stack HCI gives you an extension of Azure in your data center, but it also opens the door to then bring additional Azure services that historically have only ever lived in Azure in a Microsoft data center. You can now start to bring them down to run on premises. So the other side of Azure Arc, aside from just managing stuff that lives outside of Azure, it can now help you push Azure services out to run on premises, bringing Azure services to where you need them. So we had a little poll that we'd like to ask you, final one for today, just to understand a little bit more about the kind of workloads you're thinking about for your on-prem infrastructure going forward. What are some of your primary workloads today? And maybe in the future, what are you thinking about for on-prem specifically? We're very curious. So are you interested in mainly virtual machines? Nothing wrong with that. Thinking about containers, maybe you've got DevOps strategy that enables a little bit more simplicity. Are you looking at PaaS services and you'd like to run them on-prem, but maybe haven't been able to easily in the past? Well, all valid. Okay, so all of the above. It's got a couple. Database, that's a big one. Virtual machines, yeah. And those database services could be inside virtual machines. That works as well. We're not going to judge. VDI is getting some good numbers there. Great, okay. None of the above has 0, so that's good. We captured most of the workloads there, which is good. And these are the most common that we've seen. And this does lead into my next and final talking point that I'm going to share with you in a few moments. Okay, so I think we're at 44 responses there. That's a good number. VM seems to be the top, then database services. Anything you want to add there, Andrew?
No, just add to Ryan's question earlier. So we have helped customers move from VMware to Azure or Azure Stack. So if that's a question that comes up with the account team, we can definitely help you there as well. But yeah, definitely expected to see most of these workloads, and our engineers will walk you through any of these solutions and help you better understand whatever you're doing with these workloads, so that we can actually help you with the right solution going forward.
That's great. Yeah, and you raised a good point there, Andrew, in your statement around helping people move. Whilst that VxRail hardware, there's some considerations about reusing it. Generally speaking, if customers are looking to move from VMware to an Azure Stack HCI platform, what are your options? Well, I would certainly advise you working with a great partner like Davenport. But from a tooling perspective, Microsoft is working on expanding the tool you may have heard of called Azure Migrate. Azure Migrate, as the name suggests, helps you migrate workloads. But historically, and even to this day, it only really allows you to migrate from on-prem into Azure. Well, this whole session has been about workloads that need to stay on-prem. So Azure Migrate is evolving. It's being enhanced to allow you to migrate things horizontally as well. So migrating from perhaps legacy Hyper-V over to Azure Stack HCI, or from a VMware infrastructure over to Azure Stack HCI. So those are in preview today. And I know Andrew and the team will be more than happy to discuss that with you and how they can help you shift workloads if you do want to do that. Okay, so that's enough for the poll. We see virtual machines still being top of the league, database services and VDI as the top, forming out the top 3. Perfect, because that will fit nicely into what I'm going to round out with here. What I'm going to present here is what I'll say is a bit of an ideal world. And when I say ideal world, you're very invested in the Azure way of doing things. Maybe I'm speaking too hypothetically here, but work with me. Azure strategy, you're thinking about how you can embrace more Azure stuff here and there. Maybe you've made a big commitment to Microsoft through a subscription ahead of time. Some people know this as an Azure prepayment, and you're looking to explore ways that you can run down that payment from Azure. Well, this slide is certainly going to help with that. So I'm going to walk you through, I can't call it an architecture, but a graphic that depicts what an ideal world would look like. At the base, we have the Apex Cloud Platform for Azure, that Dell hardware platform that's deeply integrated with Azure Stack HCI as that operating system. And that operating system, that Azure Stack HCI Swiss Army knife, as I described earlier, has all the virtualization capabilities, the in-box software-defined storage, which is called Storage Spaces Direct. And for those of you who want to get really advanced, it's got in-box software-defined networking capabilities as well. And this is ever evolving, ever enhancing, and taking stuff from Azure and embedding it into the OS where appropriate. So lots of cool stuff happening in that operating system. That's your foundation. And as I mentioned earlier with the Swiss Army knife comment, it's great for running traditional virtual machines, Windows VMs, Linux VMs, applications inside. If I prefer, I can deploy my VMs from the Azure portal graphically or programmatically, like my development teams may prefer, down to my on-premises clusters, all from Azure using Azure APIs. That's real great consistency. Now, for those of you who tick the VDI box there in the poll, Azure Virtual Desktop is a service that's been available in Azure for many years, where the control plane, all the complex plumbing of setting up your VDI infrastructure, that's all handled behind the scenes in Azure. And your desktops, Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows Server desktops, they run in Azure as well. Well, now, just recently, Microsoft have made available AVD, Azure Virtual Desktop, for Azure Stack HCI, meaning now you can run those desktops on premises, close to the data sources you're using, or meeting a compliance need, or overcoming a network latency challenge. But the control plane, the management plumbing, all of that complexity, that's still hidden behind in Azure. And your administrators for the VDI environment use those familiar AVD management constructs, yet the desktops users are connecting to are on-prem. So you can have a mix of users connecting to on-prem and Azure-based desktops, depending on what their specific needs are. So that's a really cool move, something to investigate further if you're thinking about what VDI might look like for you in the future. Okay, then we think about what customers are doing in Azure. Virtual machines, we know, are very popular. Lots of folks doing that in Azure, but many are investigating using Kubernetes in Azure for containerized workloads. Well, built into Azure Stack HCI now is a Kubernetes layer. So from a development perspective, if I'm building and running apps in Azure in Kubernetes, I can take those apps, very minimal modification if at all, and I can now run them on premises on a consistent Azure managed Kubernetes platform that's running in my retail store or in my data center, wherever I need it. And then that pattern, something in Azure, something on-prem, continues. If I'm looking at machine learning, well, I can now push out through Arc machine learning elements of Azure ML to run on premises. So if I'm building and training models in Azure and I want to run them on-prem, I've got a solution to do that that's consistent. And the same is true of data services in Azure. If I'm interested in doing some of the, or using some of the modern data services that exist in Azure, like SQL managed instances and Postgres, well, guess what? They're available on-prem through Arc-enabled data services, so I can run them in my environment, close to my, meeting my compliance needs, close to my other data sources. And the same is true, this pattern continues. The app service, I referenced, and a few of you mentioned PaaS services in the poll there, 6%. The app service is very popular with developers in Azure. Well, look, you can run that on premises as well through the power of Azure Arc. And all of this can be monitored, governed, gain rich insights, secured, and maintained from Azure. Even though you've got some bits running in Azure and some bits running on premises, it's all centrally managed from Azure. And that's Microsoft's goal ultimately. And so to round out, I already stole my thunder earlier on, but I'm going to reiterate it here just to finish off the session. For many of these applications and workloads, whether they're Microsoft apps that you're pulling down from Azure to run locally, or whether they're line of business applications, database servers, and more, the inbox solution provided by Azure Stack HCI, specifically for storage, will generally meet the needs. It's got great performance, good scalability, and more. However, for organizations who need more flexibility around the storage, maybe storage is growing faster than compute. Maybe you're looking for more advanced storage functionality for your on-prem infrastructure. We, as I mentioned earlier, Dell, will be the first to enable organizations to attach external software-defined storage. And when I say external, I mean external to the Azure Stack HCI cluster. It's still sat side by side with your infrastructure. It's not somewhere off in a distant land. It's closely approximated, but it's external to the Azure Stack HCI cluster. It's a two-tier disaggregated architecture. It just gives you flexibility. It's not compulsory. It's an optional choice you can make. It's not a day one choice either. If you wanted to start with the hyperconverged architecture and later evolve into a disaggregated config, that's fine. Lots of options, lots of things to consider, but Dell is the first vendor to deliver this external storage attachment. And you know what it represents? It represents that close partnership and relationship with Microsoft from an engineering collaboration perspective, that we've got the trust in one another to build this solution for the first time. So Dell is really leading the way in that area. So that's all I had. That's where I wanted to round out. Thank you for listening to me evangelize these various technologies. I hope you found it useful. I would love to chat more and happy to work with Andrew and the team on anything you and they need. But hopefully what you've seen today with the Apex Cloud Platform as the foundation for the best Azure hybrid experience in terms of hardware solutions, fast to deploy, easy to manage, integrated with the directions that Microsoft are taking in Azure and on premises. And the icing on the cake is that ability to add that external storage in the future. And I know I mentioned PowerFlex as the storage today predominantly, but that's not to say that the book will stop with PowerFlex. So if you've got investments in other Dell storage options on-prem today, you never know. Maybe in the future they'll fit into this model as well. Resources are available in the slides. I'm sure you'll get the slide deck as well, and you can find me on Twitter and whatever else, other places you can hunt me down. But yeah, hopefully that's been useful, and I look forward to seeing you soon, and enjoy the coffee. I'll hand back to you, Andrew.
Thank you. So just real quick on that, everyone, right? It's hardware, it's software, right? It's services. So any piece that has to do with Azure Stack and understanding it, we have the engineers, the resources. So if there's any questions or follow-up, your account team will reach out. And then for those of you possibly had other staff members or teams who couldn't join, we actually are recording this. So when your account teams reach out, we can actually redo the presentation or get you access to that presentation again. And then when it comes to us just helping you evaluate these solutions, we're not going to charge you to do consulting when it comes to evaluation, right? If you want to understand the licensing, because we know it's complicated, if you want to understand the architecture and the hardware and what is required, we're going to walk you through that, right? We'll virtually whiteboard it with you. We'll come on site. So just really appreciate the time. Any questions before we step into the virtual engagement with Mike Walsh and the coffee? I'll give it a couple seconds here because I know that sometimes it takes a few seconds to come off mute or type something in the chat. But otherwise, we really thank you for the time.
Yeah, thank you very much, folks, for joining. Thanks for being interactive with the polls as well. And if anything sparks in the middle of the night and you think, what was he talking about with that? Just contact Andrew and the team, and we'll get you the info that you need.
Awesome. Well, thank you all very much. Like I said, we're a cloud service provider, so we are Microsoft Gold. We understand that piece. We're also on the VMware side of the house. So those of you navigating those two solutions, even Linux, SQL, things like that, let us know. If there are no other questions, I see a lot of thank yous, which we appreciate. Thank you for your time too. So I'll give it another 10 seconds, and then we'll jump right into and hand it over to Mike Walsh. Excellent. Well, thank you again. Your account team will be reaching out. So I'll hand it over to you, Mike.
All right, Janice.
Hi, everybody. So welcome everyone that is going to be joining us for our coffee making experience. I'm so excited for this for you guys. So if you haven't already, be sure to go ahead and grab your kits. You're going to want those right next to you. Unbox them like you would a YouTube unboxing. Make sure that you do, like Mike held up there, if you're able to get some hot water in a kettle or something next to you, or if you're in your kitchen, go ahead and get some hot water. Also, you got some little jars with you, but in your kit, but if you're able to grab an extra 1 or 2 glasses or some extra cups or mason jars, if you have those, go ahead and grab those, as well as some ice and a spoon. And so you're going to use all of that today, but I'll give you all a few seconds to grab your kits because you're going to want those. And here's a tip. Here's a fun tip. So if you are, well, first I'll say unmute yourselves if you would like to. We are very interactive here. So unmute your cameras. We want to see you all making and creating and sharing with us. But here's a tip. If you take your kit, once you have unboxed everything, if you take your kit and then you close it up, you can set it right in front of you and you can put your computer, you can put your phone or whatever you're viewing on top of that for a good viewing experience. So I'll give everyone a second to go ahead and get their kits. Y'all have some branded items in there. So when you do have your kit, I want to see those if y'all are willing to unmute. And we are going to have such a fun time for y'all today. So I will say y'all are going to get some good gems, some good coffee gems, and we're going to put some knowledge to the test with some trivia. So the coffee is here to wake you all up and to get you all ready, well, depending upon where you're at, ready for your day or ready to start your night off, because today is Thursday. So, hey, it's never a wrong time to have coffee. I'll just put that out there. But I'll give you all just a few more seconds. And if you are already set up, that is great. Just make sure that you do have everything within arm's reach because we are going to be moving and grooving in real time. So I see Andrew with the mug and with some cups. We love it. We love it. That's a pretty blue. That's a big Davenport mug. Love that. Ready to go. All right, y'all. So we are going to hop right into it again one more time. My name is Janice. I am going to be here kind of in the wings for y'all. So before we get started and before I introduce who's going to be leading you all today, because when I tell y'all have the top tier. Oh, y'all got the top tier. So first off, I'm going to say that I will be in the chat throughout the entire experience. So if you have any questions, you can hop in there. I will be putting the instructions in. So if you miss something, just look at the chat. I will have you. I'm here to guide you along the way as Mike guides us. So with that, if you have not already gotten some hot water, gotten an extra glass or two, a spoon, as well as some ice, grab those and then come back with us. Put your viewing mode in speaker mode if you are able to. That way you can see Mike's setup, and that way you are able to really see up close what exactly is going on, because he does have 2 different views. You can see his beautiful face, but then you can also see what he's doing with his hand. So that'll be fun. Without further ado, I'm talking too much. Y'all didn't come for me. Y'all came for the coffee and for the star mic. So let me just give y'all a little intro into who y'all are working with today, because y'all do really have the best. So Mike Walsh is the owner of Atlanta-based Livewire Coffee. He has been working in the coffee world since he was 14, y'all, 14. So after a trip to London, interacting with street vendors, the idea of setting up and offering small footprint pop-up coffee solutions statewide was born. Another immersive experience to Greece furthered Mike's mastery of the art and science that is coffee. So today, Mike is on a mission to share his passion with the world using the finest ingredients, proper recipes, and plenty of tips along the way. So his cart has been featured on Netflix, y'all. That is Netflix, and loved by the Atlanta Falcons. So y'all are not just working with anybody today. Y'all are working with the Mike Walsh. So I'll hand it over to him so we can get into this coffee.
All right. Thank you so much. And don't worry, I'm not famous. I'm not that famous. I love the Tim's got the cartoon going there. Very nice. quick show of hands if I can see some of you. There we go. Look at that. Beautiful. So everybody's got some branded mugs, the Davenport mugs. That's great because we're going to be able to use those as part of this coffee experience. So a little brief introduction, as Denise mentioned, I did have an opportunity to get a lot of inspiration along the way in my coffee journey. We talked about London and then Greece. One of the great things about journeys and our destination and the coffee journey is that there's been a continuation. So since I've joined the virtual experience team, I've actually had the opportunity to go to Vietnam. And there's a great drink there called the Cafe Suada. And I actually left with a couple parting gifts, and I was able to leave with this little Finn brewer, and you'll see that you have one in here. So today, our experience is called the Iced Java Voyage. And really what we're making is we're making the Cafe Suada. We're making the Vietnamese iced coffee. You can also have it hot, but we're going to make it iced because I don't know where you live, but it's really hot where I'm at. But this will run you about 25,000 dong. So, and that translates into about $1, which was great. So if you ever get the chance to try some true, authentic coffee from the other side of the world, Vietnam is a great place to try it. But fortunately, you don't have to hop on a plane and go to another country. And is that some Vietnamese dong right there? Wow, 20,000. That'll get you not very much, but yeah, it'll get you almost one of these. Amazing. I don't have any left. I don't know where mine went. I spent it all. So we're gonna try to make about 2 coffees today, and we're really just gonna make the same coffee, but we're gonna just add a little bit of variables and nuances. If you've ever taken one of my strict coffee classes, you'll know that I provide a scale. We provide a grinder because it's always best to have whole bean coffee. We talk about the roast date and why that's really important to drink coffee as close to the roast date as possible. Here we are pretty close to the roast date. But what I will say is we did, to make it very convenient, we pre-ground the coffee. We don't have a scale, but I've got a scale here and I can weigh it out. And so we're going to get right to making our coffee. So if you haven't had a chance to get a hot water kettle going, if you've got an electric kettle, 200 degrees is a great brewing temperature. If you just have a boiling kettle, boiling is fine. I will say that 200 degrees is the ideal brewing temp, as that's one of the variables that we want to extract our coffee with. There's grind size, there's the brewing method, there's a lot of other things, but temperature is one of them. And we don't want to really throw boiling water directly on that coffee. It can kind of mute some of the flavors we're going for. So if you have a boiling kettle like mine, just let it rest for about 10 seconds. You can even open the lid, let it come up boil, and then you can start brewing and you're good to go. I've seen people use just, a measuring cup in the microwave if you have to. But we're going to dive right in, so you want to have that ready. And I also mentioned having a glass nearby. Our first brew, we're going to brew directly into a glass. You could use your Davenport mug. I just like the glass because you're going to be able to see everything, and that's going to be really fun. So let's go ahead and start our first coffee. So I've pre-ground all the coffee here, and I just kind of measured it out. We don't have a scale, but we have some good ways to measure things without that scale. I always recommend a coffee scale. So if you have one, we're going to want to grab about 19 grams of coffee. Okay. If you don't have a scale, you can follow along with me. I'm not going to use the scale in this instance. And because we have 56 grams, we're going to do about a third of this pack. So try to just sort of eyeball a third of your coffee pack. And then what you're going to do is, if you see right here, our little Finn brewer, that's what it's called. P-H-I-N-N, I believe. So we're going to take out your Finn brewer. And then there's this little piece right here. We want to take that out. The little middle piece, it's got a little handle. And then if you've got a mason jar or a glass, I recommend doing that. You can use your Davenport mug if it fits. You might have gotten some of these little glasses. I've noticed that it could possibly spill out the sides. I tried as best as I could. And even when I was really, really careful, a little bit of the coffee got on the sides of these. So I wouldn't recommend this tiny glass, but we can drink out of it for sure. Okay, so now we've got our Finn brewer, and let's go ahead, and you don't really have to set it on top of your glass. let's just go ahead and eyeball a third of our coffee and then pour it into our fin brewer. I'm going to weigh it just to make sure. And I'm going to weigh out about 18.5 to 19 grams. But if you're just eyeballing it, about a third of that pack we're going to use. So you'll have enough for 3 full coffees. And just a little heads up of what our brewing method is. We also don't have a scale to measure our total yield, but it's going to be somewhere around like a 10 to 11 ounce coffee. And what we're doing is, the reason we don't really need a scale in this instance is we're making sort of a concentrate. We're going to brew until the fin is sort of full, and then it's going to make a really strong coffee that we're going to have over condensed milk, which will dilute the coffee itself, and then the ice will dilute the coffee. So the reason we're not kind of getting too scientific is because the dilution will kind of create that stretch that we need to create the proper size. All right, so you're going to take out, remember, before you put your coffee in, I'm going to do this here. You're going to take out that middle piece. Save this for later. So take the top off and take out the middle piece, and then about a third of your bag of coffee you can use to put here in your like little layer. I got 17.5 grams. I'm measuring. Don't worry if you don't have a scale. That's fine. I've got 18.5 grams. We could have made it stronger, but what I've noticed with this size fin brewer is that you're going to be brewing for too long of a time if you have too much coffee in here. So we want to get a decent amount of time to try to extract our coffee. And even with that, this is a slower brew method. Okay, so I've got my third of a bag of coffee, about 18 to 19 grams in here. We're going to save this middle piece for the side, and we're going to set aside our coffee. And then let's grab some condensed milk. So if you have your Davenport mug, I'm going to take a little mason jar. So if you have a glass nearby, all you got to do, and it's going to equal about 25 to 30 grams, but a generous spoonful is going to be about that amount. And so you're going to want to take a generous spoonful of your condensed milk and just put it in the bottom of your glass that you're going to be brewing into. So generous spoonful. I'm going to do, or 2 small spoonfuls here. A little messy, but you know what? It's Thursday. It's okay to get messy. So I've got my condensed milk at the bottom. And what's going to be really cool is I'm going to move the camera around so you can kind of see a little bit of the brew method. Okay, so we are just about ready to brew. You got your hot water kettle going. It should be all on a good boil. So again, we're going to brew probably about 5 ounces. And the way that we're going to measure is the fin's going to overflow, so we don't want to overflow it. So that's going to help us know how much to brew. And remember, you can always brew less volume because we're going to dilute it later with some ice. So err on the side of brewing less than brewing more of your water and your coffee. All right, so we want to get this brew time, and we want to get a good extraction time. So the first thing we're going to do is hang on to this piece. We're going to use it in the middle. But first thing we want to do is get all of the coffee wet. So we call that a bloom. So similar to a pour over, we want to bloom the coffee. So all we want to do is just pour now. So you can go ahead and do that with me and just pour and get all of that coffee wet and then pause. And we're going to let all of that drip down. I'm going to take my camera. You can see here, it's a little foggy, but we got that nice little drip and we're creating that nice little layer. Yeah, that's nice. It's very pretty. Coffee's very pretty and tasty all at the same time. Any questions at this point as far as our brew method?
And you can drop them in the chat if you'd like, or you can unmute yourself and call them out. But it smells nice. Right. Ooh, okay, Andrew,
right,
I see.
It's brewing.
It's brewing.
Okay, so now let's take that middle piece with the little ledge, and we're gonna just stick it down over our coffee that we just sort of bloomed, and then just lightly press it. And now when we're ready, we're going to fill up the rest of this, you can see on the overhead cam, with our water. And again, how much are we supposed to brew? Basically, we just don't let it overflow. We just fill all the way to the top, and that's going to tell us how much to brew. I can let it go and maybe give it one more pour, right? Because I want to fully extract my coffee, and then I can put my top back on. So maybe that third pour here, pouring all the way to the top, and then just set the top on. We set the top on so that, oh, that's funny. I can see my reflection in there. That's pretty cool. We set the top on just to let the heat trap in. And let's take another look at our coffee that we've been brewing here. And so you might notice it's dripping really slowly, and that's okay. So we get a slow drip. It is a little bit on the bitter side, and I'll explain why. Is because when you have a really long brew, you are over extracting the coffee a little bit. But you know, the Vietnamese style, bitters kind of their jam. They like some bitterness. I definitely had some bitter coffees and had to learn how to appreciate it in Vietnam. But yeah, that slow style will create some bitterness if it's over extracted. The converse, though, if you have a brew time and your brew is just happening too fast, then really what's going to happen is you're going to have an under extracted coffee, because that water and that coffee just didn't have enough time to marry, right? So we want to be somewhere in the middle. But in this instance, it's okay if we're brewing just a little bit on that long side. I know in my experience, the first time I did this, I was like, wow, this really is not brewing very fast, but that's okay. That is pretty normal. What you can do is you can kind of give it a nice little stir to see if you can agitate some of that coffee and lift up maybe the middle piece, stir it, and then press it back and just let it brew. And then we wait, and then we're gonna get on to the next step, which is basically we're gonna shake this over ice and our bar shaker available. But I'd say while we're letting it brew, one, do we have any questions? Are we following along easily, or do I need to speed up, slow down? And I think Andrew's right with me. Okay, cool. And then maybe it's time for a trivia question.
Yes, I do. So everybody's saying it's doing a good speed. Everything is going well. I can hear the dripping, but while we listen to that, I do have some coffee trivia. So let's see how much everybody knows. Okay. So the first one is going to be, this is actually a pretty hard one, but let's see what we got. And you can unmute or you can drop it in the chat. So the first one is, what country is the world's biggest consumer of coffee on a per person basis? So the options are Netherlands, Denmark, Iceland, or Finland. Again, that's Netherlands, Denmark, Iceland, or Finland. Okay, so I see Iceland. Okay, I see a couple. Okay, we got somebody going against the grain. I see a Finland. Okay, so Finland and Iceland are, Iceland is taking the lead. I see a Denmark, Finland, Denmark. Nobody says the Netherlands. That's okay. Okay, so it's kind of mixed. Finland. Okay, so nobody cared. Nobody said America. No, that's okay. But surprisingly enough, the answer is Finland. So coffee is so popular in Finland that 2 10-minute coffee breaks are legally mandated for the workers. So we might need to implement that over here in the States, because I could take 2 10-minute coffee breaks. But yes, exactly, London. This needs to happen in America. Oh, Sandra's going to move to Finland. We might have to move with you. We'll take you with us, Mike.
Yeah, I definitely want to visit. Not sure if I could handle the cold, though.
That is true. But that's
I
why
would
we
be
have
drinking a lot of coffee.
Keep us warm.
Yeah.
Sandra, you'll have to write us back. Once you get these recipes down, you'll have to take them over there and you'll have to let us know how that works.
Nice. All right. My coffee is still brewing, so yours probably is too. So let's go ahead and take our bar shaker. You've got a top, you got a middle piece, you got the little topper, you got the bottom. So in the bottom, we're going to get a generous helping of ice. Maybe, depending on how large your cubes are, a handful of cubes, I guess. That would be a good measurement. And again, we can always brew stronger because we're going to dilute it with things like condensed milk and ice to make this just foamy ice drink. I can't wait to try it. We're going to let it come down a little bit. We are still brewing.
They say good things take time, so I know this coffee is going to be good.
And you see that nice little layer. That's fun. We're going to have some fun. We're going to play with that. All right. I'm going to remove my little fin here. And then in the meantime, I'm going to refill my kettle and then wash any dishes that I have so that we can jump right into coffee number 2.
So while you all are washing some dishes, that's a good cooking tip to wash as you go. I should write that down.
Yeah, and then reheating my kettle as well, so I'll get ready for that second brew.
Yes, we have to reset. That is a great idea. And while we do that, I have another question for you guys coming in hot, and it'll be quick. Okay, so true or false? Okay, true or false? 40% of the world's coffee is produced by Brazil. True or false?
True.
Okay, I hear a true. I see some true, I see some false, I see some true. Okay, well, you know what? Y'all are right. The answer is true.
All righty. Okay, I am brewed. So you should, if you're, and even if you've got a little bit of water left over in the fin brewer, that's fine. Again, we've gotten 90% of that flavor extracted out of that coffee. So let's go ahead and do this. We can just now, with that condensed milk, it's heated down, and just give it a nice stir. I took the overhead cam and I kind of moved it to a not overhead cam, a side cam, if you will. All right, we'll move that back. Now, some people drink it just like this, and it is delicious, but it's going to be very strong. So let's go ahead and take our bar shaker. We should have some ice in there already. Let's let that sit, and then let's go ahead and fill our jar or our Davenport mug with some ice. You can fill it all the way to the top. So now I've got my ice mason jar. I've got my little bar shaker. Take the top on and then put the extra top on. First time I shook this, it went everywhere. If it does make a mess on you, it's okay. It's a Thursday. But just go ahead and shake it until it's nice and cold. You're probably going to be melting a lot of the ice, and that's okay. But we're going to get this like really frothy, strong, little bit bitter, and definitely sweet and creamy. All right, mine is ready to go. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and try it at this angle. And that's perfect because that's right about 10 ounces, which is a good ratio because we started with 19 grams of coffee, a little bit less than 21 grams, which would yield about 12. So a good 10-ounce coffee is going to be still a nice, strong drink. So even without the measuring tools that we normally have, we still got a really good ratio. So let's give it a try.
I see a head nod from Andrew. Looks like it's hitting the spot. Ooh, it looks nice. Y'all have to Instagram these.
So that's a good segue to kind of tell you about a drink that condensed milk is not the only, as far as drinks go, that Vietnamese iced coffee or Vietnamese coffee, the Café Suada. Condensed milk is used for that, but there's another drink from Spain called the Café Bonbon. And we were doing that in my shop in Portland. What I really liked about it is you could just use espresso, but we did 4 shots of espresso. Typically, like an 8-ounce or a 12-ounce will have a double shot, but we did 2 doubles, added a little bit of cinnamon, and added that to the condensed milk, the same amount, maybe about 25 to 30 grams of condensed milk. And then a hot drink, we would do a little steamed milk over top, And then if it was cold, we would do a little bit of that milk, maybe 4 to 5 ounces, and then shake it over ice. Absolutely delicious. And I think on our second drink, if you've got some cinnamon nearby, I highly recommend that. We're gonna do some little cinnamon in that next drink. But and we are gonna move to that next drink, but I'd love to get some feedback. Do you hate it? Do you love it?
You can unmute, you can drop in the chat. What does it taste like?
We need Steve Carell to go, I love it.
Ooh, I see a yum. Sandra says yum. I saw a thumbs up from Andrew. We got an excellent.
Right? Yeah. And then don't forget to take your bar shaker and just rinse it out a little bit.
And if you feel like you're in a sharing mood, you can save some for someone else to have a little taste test. But it sounds like you guys are going to drink it all up, which we love.
And we've got another coffee to make, and then we're going to enjoy some a nitro flat white with a little chocolate to end the little experience here. So let's dive right into coffee number 2. Again, same brewing method, same concept. We're going to speed up this brew this time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this middle piece, and we're going to just get rid of it entirely and see how that changes our extraction. Maybe they'll speed up our extraction a little bit for us too. Okay, so you've got your packet here. I do have the handy scale nearby, so I am going to use a scale. I'll put it right in the overhead cam. So we've used 1/3, so we have 2/3 left. So now you should just try to use half of what's left in the packet. And then here's the fun part. After today, you have another drink left to make. You'll have another 1/3 to make that third and final drink tomorrow morning when you wake up. All right, so for now, let's grab some coffee. I'm going to do about 18.5 grams. I do have the luxury of having a scale nearby. I do highly recommend it. But again, for the purposes of today, we can eyeball a lot of this because the Finn brewer is kind of our measurement as far as our total yield. And we've already got the grams in the packet. And so we can just say, hey, you know, 1/3 of that is going to be about what we need. And that should get us to what we need. If you do want to invest in a scale, I highly recommend it. It's going to help you get more accurate. Similar to when bakers use things like flour, and you're using volumetric types of measurements, you're going to get a lot more accurate when you start using that scale. Okay, so this time I'm going to just brew directly into the bar shaker. Why? I don't know, just try something new, right? So I'm going to take that generous spoonful. Now, if you found your coffee was a little too sweet, maybe dial back a little bit on the condensed milk. There's not really a recipe here. I say somewhere between 25 and 30 grams, but you might like half sweet. So maybe you only want like 15 grams or, you know, one small spoonful. I kind of did maybe 2, almost 3 spoonfuls. So I was probably getting 10 grams per spoonful. So kind of think about that as you're constructing your drink the second time. Was it too sweet? Did it need to get diluted a little bit more? And then you can make those adjustments as you need. So I'm going to do the same as I did last time because I really liked my coffee. I really liked the sweetness level and the creaminess level. So, all right. So I've got kind of 2 spoonfuls or maybe like 1 big spoonful or 1.5 big spoonfuls here. So it's probably about 30 grams. And you can see it in the overhead cam. Let's take our Finn brewer and let's put it directly over our bar shaker. And then we're going to just skip the middle piece and see how that kind of changes things. Now, let's grab our hot water kettle. Remember, if you've got it on boil, let it rest for a little bit so that it comes down to that more 200-degree measurement. If you have the ability to get or you already have an electric kettle, 200 degrees is a great brewing temp. So let's go ahead now and let's start at bloom. So there's kind of 3 phases we kind of glossed over a little bit, and that is there's sort of a degassing phase, a blooming phase, and then sort of the actual brewing phase of the coffee. And what we're letting that do is we're letting some of that CO2 and that oxygen release so it can impart a lot of flavor. So the first goal, that first pour, and you can do it with me if you watch on the overhead cam, I'm just getting all of the coffee wet, and then I'm going to kind of stir that coffee a little bit, kind of swirl it around, and let it drip into the brewer here. And you're not going to get that beautiful visual that I gave you the last time, because I'm brewing into something that's opaque, but maybe you can try to imagine, right? It's looking beautiful down there. I can kind of try to pull it away for a little bit. You can see that it's melting that condensed milk. And then we'll let that drip down. And then finish up with another pour. So that second pour now, kind of making nice little swirls, getting everything kind of coated, and then going all the way to the top. I let it drip down for a little bit, and then I'll do one small pour. Kind of what I did last time too. So I like to give it a stir because that's going to speed up our extraction time. And then I'll give it one more pour, and then we'll just let gravity take over. Now you can just take your little top, put it on top, and let it do the rest of the work. And it's probably going to be a few moments, so I would say we should do like one, maybe even two trivia questions, unless we got any questions at this point regarding our second coffee.
Is everybody doing okay? If anybody has a question, please unmute. Please drop your questions in the chat, because I know I would probably be lost in the sauce, but y'all seem to be keeping up. So I need to come roll with y'all when we're making coffee. So I do have another coffee question. Okay. This one, you might have to get into your bag a little bit, but here we go. So Arabic varieties of coffee, such as Java and Mocha, are named after A, the coffee grower, B, towns of origin, C, predominant flavors, or D, ports of origin. So that's going to be Arabic varieties such as Java and Mocha are named after A, the coffee grower, B, towns of origin, C, predominant flavors, or D, the ports of origin. Oh, wow, okay. We got a D, a B, ports of origin. Okay, ports of origin. We got flavor, we got the town. Okay. Y'all are good. Where were y'all when I was taking standardized testing? Y'all have some good guesses. So the answer to this one is going to be the ports of origin. So these names are named after their ports of origin. Java is actually the name of an island off of Southeast Asia, and Mocha derives from Mocha, Yemen. So that's a little history and geography lesson, if you didn't know. Which is really cool, because you can, next time you're at Starbucks, whip that out.
Yeah, whip out some knowledge on them. And I will say that is really interesting, because I think Mocha has become synonymous with chocolate, but Mocha is just a port. It's an actual place, but somehow a drink with chocolate in it got kind of synonymous with the word mocha, and it became a cafe mocha. But mocha itself does not mean chocolate. But because sometimes I'll get that question, can you add a little mocha syrup in there? And of course yes, because everything is always evolving. While we were doing some trivia, I also threw a couple dashes of cinnamon in here. So we were sort of working on that cafe suada. The cinnamon will kind of bring us back to that drink that I mentioned earlier, that cafe bonbon, which is an inspiration from Spain. I like to do mine with a quad shot of espresso, but this Vietnamese fin brew is still really strong. And if you think about it, espresso is really strong, and it's diluted with things like milk and sugar or flavors. And this fin brewing method also is really strong, right? So one of the reasons, again, why we don't need a scale is we can just use the pot itself and fill to the top, maybe give it one more fill or a tiny little bit more water. But that's going to give us a good measurement for a really strong drink. And if we made it too strong, we'll just dilute it with some ice.
Everybody still doing okay?
And I'm giving it a little stir just to kind of try to speed up that extraction. And then, of course, I'm still sipping on coffee number one. I think it was a fantastic brew.
See, that's the benefit of these experiences. You get to sip while you're still creating. And if y'all are doing okay, give me a thumbs up in the chat. Looks like Andrew, you're powering away. I feel like we need to put you on the poster for the coffee.
Yeah. All right, so that's going to brew down. Let's go ahead and take another glass. If you want to use your little tiny glass and do a little sample version, you can do that as well. Hey, why not? I'll do that. It's so cute. It's like a little tiny glass, you know. I'm going to just have a little afternoon tea with it. Maybe I'll make 2 of them. All right, my coffee is just about brewed down. I'm going to give that another shake. You can see on that overhead cam that the sort of coffee beans that have been extracted are kind of, the water is almost out, right? And even if we let it go right now, that'd still be okay. So I'm going to give it about 5 seconds, and then I'm going to move my thin brewer off to the side. 3, 2, 1. And of course, we're left with our condensed milk and now our brewed coffee that's been brewed with our fin brewer. So now I'm going to take a spoon. I'm going to stir it up. You should see the color change into that nice. And you know, you can also go off color. So if you wanted a little sweeter, you could grab a little condensed milk and see if that color changes to more of that white creamy color, right? So I did that just now because I noticed, hey, you know, that color's a little on the dark side. I want it a little bit more creamy, and so I can kind of eyeball it there based on past experience. All right, let's take some ice, and we're going to throw it directly in the bar shaker, maybe a handful and a half or 2 handfuls. It's really hard to go wrong because the hot coffee is going to melt this ice. So let's go ahead and take our top. Remember that we've got this middle piece at the top with our little holes in it, and then our top to get that nice and covered. If you don't have everything sealed up, it's going to make a mess everywhere, and we don't want that. So let's go ahead and shake. Oh, before I shake, let me take, oh, that's right, I've got my little glasses here. Okay. I highly recommend, you know, investing in a fun bar shaker. You can have some flair, entertain some guests with some of this coffee. They've got some now. I've got one where it actually doesn't get cold on the outside, so you don't know when it's done. But it's a really great bar shaker. All right. So now.
Pardon.
Sorry?
Oh, I was just saying a fun party trick.
Oh, and I put a little cinnamon in mine, and that is coming out really strong. So let's go ahead and our first brew in the overhead cam there. I'm making my second brew. Overhead cam. And of course, made a little bit of a mess, but that's okay. More importantly, let's go ahead and try our iced coffee now. And if you heard I was slurping, coffee people, we love to slurp. If you ever go to a coffee cupping, we do a lot of slurping of our coffee. It helps really aerate the palate, notice some flavors that may be there that maybe you didn't notice from earlier.
What do we think? Thumbs up? Are we liking brew 1 or brew 2 better? Which one? Drop in the chat, y'all. Okay. Okay. For those of y'all that added the cinnamon, is it really coming out? Okay, we have a lot of, okay, number 1, okay. But hey, now that you know how to make both, y'all can sip on both of them. I wonder how they'd be mixed together. Is that too much? I'm doing too much.
Hey, just imagine this. If you've never made any of those drinks earlier today, within an hour, you've learned how to make a Vietnamese coffee and a Spanish coffee. And more importantly, you've enjoyed it and tasted it. So let's break out some chocolate. I think this will go really well with our coffees. And if you've got this little nitro flat white, we're going to compare and contrast. You know, this coffee is airtight. It does have nitrogen in it. Nitrogen can bring out some of the acidity in coffee. It can kind of give it's more about mouthfeel, I've found, with nitro coffee. So I'm going to open it up, and then I want to agitate the nitrogen. So it's actually infused with nitrogen. So what I'm going to do is, as I pour it, I'm going to kind of bounce the can back and forth. Maybe even like side to side, so that I can get some of those bubbles in there, that nitrogen. So we can kind of compare this with our 2 drinks that we made. And I would say I'm taking a liberal stance on that Cafe Bonbon. But I'd say as far as the Cafe Suada, the Vietnamese iced coffee, we were pretty spot on. That was pretty close.
What's everybody tasting? So, okay, let's see. The pour method just looks like you have been drinking too much coffee. It's okay, Jason. We're not here to judge. We're all drinking the coffee together. The pour method, hey. We love
Pour
it.
method? Yeah, I try to give it a nice little shake so you can get that nitrogen out, and you'll see that nitrogen foam here. So again, nitrogen is really fun. I mean, cold brew, I've got some nitro cold brew here in my fridge. It's really fun to drink because you can drink it black, and yet it'll feel like you're drinking cream and sugar because the nitrogen brings some of the natural sweetness out of that coffee. It'll feel like you're drinking something creamy. I would say that's all about mouthfeel there. You know, it's kind of how your tongue is interpreting that quote unquote creaminess that, you know, is not really there, but the nitrogen kind of gives that foaminess to it. So I gotta say, it's a good drink, but I mean, if I was to vote, I would say, you know, the second brew that we made is my favorite. Feel free to chime in with the chat if you agree or disagree.
I saw a lot of, we had a few votes for brew number 1, but does anyone, okay, Sandra agrees the second is better. Is anybody feeling the nitro over the others, or which one, okay, which one would be your wake up and go coffee? Which one would you grab first? Okay, I see a number 2, the nitro is really good, okay.
And you didn't have to spend any time brewing it, so maybe there's a little give and take here, right? Maybe you like the Vietnamese coffee, and so you want to take some time brewing it, or maybe you just want to grab and go. So, you know, finding your coffee preferences is never a bad thing.
Yeah, and we gave you a lot of options. And if anyone has any questions about other types of coffee and how you brew it, maybe your at-home brew isn't brewing how you want it to brew now, this would be a good person to ask some questions to. Just gonna toss that out there. But if no one has any questions, I have one more quick question for you all. Okay, this one is going to test your TV and your coffee trivia. Okay, what popular TV series from 2021 featured a scene centered around Dalgona coffee? Is it A, White Lotus, B, Squid Game, C, Dope Sick, or D, Yellow Jackets? So that's A, White Lotus, B, Squid Game, C, yeah, that's coming after C, Dope Sick, or D, Yellow Jackets. And the question is, what popular TV series from 2021 featured a scene centered around Dalgona coffee? Let's see who was watching all that TV during COVID. Okay, we have an answer. We have a answer for B. Okay, nobody else wants to try. It's okay, y'all, because B is correct. Andrew, that is correct. It was Squid Game. So there is a slight coffee scene in there. So now you guys have to go back and watch that. But that was my last trivia question. Does anyone else have any other questions for Mike? Any coffee related or chocolate pairing with coffee related questions? That would be my type of question. We do have one question. How about what movie featured now, y'all, I'm not good with this. Kopi Luwak? Kopi Luwak.
Let me see if I can see it in the chat here.
Yeah, you know, I butchered that. I completely butchered that. I'm not good with,
I know that.
oh, but I'm not familiar. Oh, it's a move. Okay. Y'all, well, that one, I'm in the dark on that one. So I'll have to Google that for y'all. But if there are no other questions, we are drawing near on time, and I want to thank y'all. Y'all are a good group. I hope this coffee really got y'all in. For those on the East Coast, hopefully, oh, the bucket list movie. Gotcha. You know what? I was behind on that one. I was there with y'all. So for y'all on the East Coast, hopefully this coffee gets you ignited for your night, for this Thursday night. And then if you're on the West Coast like myself, hey, we're up and we're grooving now. And these coffees are really gonna inspire us to hopefully try and brew your own coffee as you can. And Mike, do you have any last suggestions on
Sure.
choosing or brewing any coffee?
Yeah, I would say if you have any questions after this, my Instagram handle is Livewire Coffee. Really simple, just at Livewire Coffee. Feel free to slide in my DMs and ask any coffee related questions. I'll try to make sure I see it if it comes in, because sometimes you can't see them. But I do try to check. I usually am pretty good about the notifications. But it may be about brewing equipment, grind size, types of coffee that you like, and we can get a little bit more detail into that. We didn't really get into too much detail about the coffee today, but if you take one of our other experiences / workshops, we do get a little bit more detailed in the differences in regions of coffee, and we also provide a scale and a grinder, and so it's a little bit more dialed in that way. So, but if you have any questions about brewing equipment, scales, coffee recipes, flavor profiles, I'm happy to answer them. It's what I love to do. So, yeah.
And if you're in Atlanta, you'll definitely have to check Mike out and check it out so you can say you've been to a next Netflix rated spot. But I want to thank you all for joining us today, and make sure you continue to fill up your Davenport mugs and take those with you as you go. Have those close and handy. We want to thank you all so much for joining us today with myself and with Mike and with Davenport, and you all are going to have a great, this is May, so a great kickoff into summer with these nice brews that you can definitely break out at any party that you have. So I want to thank you all so much. Y'all were a great group. Enjoy the rest of your day. And be sure to share, pass the coffee along. Don't hog it all. Share it with somebody.
Bye, everyone.
Yes. Thank you all very much. Your account teams will be reaching out. If you had Grubhub or you had the coffee and you want some coffee, reach out to them. They can get a coffee. They can get a coffee with you, possibly some lunch, do a tech profile. Really appreciate everyone, and we'll be in touch. Thank you very much.